The Hebrew people, the descendants of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, had come to Egypt in the days of Joseph. They settled on the west side of the Nile Delta in an area called Goshen. On the southern end of this is the city of Cairo and the pyramids, the Great Pyramids. The name of Goshen is not an Egyptian word, but is Semitic and came from the occupation of the region by Semites before the kingdom of Egypt developed. This was the place where Joseph met his father after their years of separation. Here is where Jacob moved his family when they came to Egypt. The land of Goshen, besides being an expression of that we use, old land of Goshen. Besides that, it's an area of, it's a choice area. Prime grazing, the Nile Delta floods and recedes every year, and it's green pastures and very desirable. It is called the best of the land in Genesis 47:6 and also in verse 11. It is also identified as the land of Ramesses. The Israelites had a pretty good life here for a few hundred years, even 100 years or so after Joseph had died. They continued to grow and prosper. Genesis 15, God had made a promise to Abraham, though. God had told him that his descendants would be enslaved and oppressed in Egypt for 400 years. And after a time of such slavery, they would be allowed to return. So, in the fullness of time, at about 1730 BC or so, a series of different people began conquering Egypt. And this prime Goshen land was usually the first lands occupied. Slavery was soon imposed on the people of Israel. One nation, and then another, and then another, until came the time for a king of a new Egyptian empire. And all throughout these times, the population of Israel grew and grew and grew. And we read this morning, then a new king who did not know about Joseph came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So he commanded his Egyptian midwives to kill all the newborn Hebrew babies. And then when that plan failed, he directed all Egyptian people to seize any male baby and fling them into the Nile River and let them drown. These were desperate times for Israel. And God heard the cries of the people and set into motion the events of their promised delivery. There are specific events that occur in many nations, small, tiny things that would seem to almost make no difference and get lost in the events of things. But then when reviewed centuries later, these little things are found to be the pivotal point where everything changes. Every time we celebrate coming together for the Lord's Supper, we are reminded that the simple act of blessing and breaking a piece of bread and pouring out a cup to share at supper does change the world and will rewrite salvation history for the whole human race. Jesus doing that simple act, changing the protocol, changed the world. This morning we see the same thing here. We are a witness to see the point where Israel's destiny and reality, if they were ever going to be restored to a free nation, it hangs on what happens here. The freedom of such a great nation depends on the life laying in a tiny hand-woven basket coated with tar. The Hebrew word used for Moses' basket is the same that is used for Noah's ark. Carries forward the promise. The papyrus used to make the little ark was also used in construction of many light boats throughout Egypt and Mesopotamia. And now this little item from the Chicago Daily News a while back. The article had stated that the initial reason for Standard Oil Company to go to Egypt and explore for oil actually came from this very story. It seems that one of the directors of the company was reading Exodus and came across Exodus 2. And when he read that the ark which the mother of Moses made for her child was, as the King James Bible put it, dubbed with slime and with pitch, this oil man realized and reasoned that where there was pitch, there is oil. And if there was oil in Moses' time, it's probably still there during his time. The company sent out their geologists and their oil experts, and of course, they did discover great fields of oil there. Our NIV version of what the oil man read, we read this morning, but when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch and placed the child in it. Because of the weaving pattern of the papyrus leaves and then covering it with tar and pitch on the outside, the boat is able to be set afloat and to drift among the reeds near the banks of the mighty Nile River, and it will not sink. Miriam, Moses' sister, is left to watch what happens to the baby on her mother's orders. Israel's salvation is depending on the watchful eyes of the little sister of the baby in that tiny boat. It is only this little girl who is watching what happens, just her and God. Numbers 26, we read, the name of Abram's wife was Jochebed, a descendant of Levi, who was born to the Levites in Egypt. To Amram she bore Aaron, Moses, and their sister, Miriam. The little girl watching on the riverbank is Miriam. Miriam is the daughter of Jochebed, sister to Aaron and also to Moses. The mother is only mentioned by name, Jochebed, only twice in the Bible. But her actions on this day changed the course of history for the nation of Israel. The giving up of her baby to the fate of the river was not out of desperation, but was born from her great trust in her Creator and in her trusting the strength and faith of God from her heritage. She was a descendant of Levi. She became the wife of Abram, who was also a descendant of Levi. The Levites were charged with taking care of the godly things, the temples and the rituals of God. Hers was a background of holiness and devotion to the Lord. Her family duties and responsibilities were passed down to her, and those priestly duties would be passed by her on to her descendants. By understanding who she was and in accepting her family background, we can understand how she would know God's promises which were made to the Hebrew nation. She could also count, and she would know God's promises were made to the Hebrew nation some 400 years before. And God promised after 400 years the nation would be returned. But of course there was danger in her plans and her actions of the baby. But she also knew that the Pharaoh's daughter would frequently come and bathe to this spot in the river. This day may be the day that she would return. Moses' mother walked humbly with the Lord and trusted God. She trusted also that her baby would be found by the Pharaoh's daughter. As we see, this was indeed the correct day, and the baby was in the right place at the right time. Moses was discovered and pulled from the water. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. This was when Moses' sister, Amram, found the courage and approached royalty. Not usually done, a common slave to approach royalty, but she did. Then his sister asked the Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" We are not told and cannot be sure, but I can imagine Jochebed, the mother, is also looking down a little farther on the river, is watching what happens. And this must have been the most crucial and heart-pounding moment for her. The Pharaoh's orders were for Egyptians to throw all Hebrew male babies into the river and let them die. It would have been understandable for the daughter to have the baby thrown back. Jochebed holds her breath and strains to hear and to see what the girl will do. The fate, the very life of her baby is in this young girl's next actions. This is the point where either Moses will have his end or become the future of his people. This is one of those moments that we talked about where fate teeters on a very sharp edge. Two small words and the world has changed. "Yes, go," she says. Can you just see it? The Levite mother breathes again. Drops to her knees, offers prayers of thanks. Her baby, at least for now, will survive. And Jochebed waits for her daughter to return and come to get her. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. Then she returns back with her to the Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, I will pay you." So the woman took the baby, nursed him, and when the child grew older, she took him to the Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." The Bible does not give us any more information about the mother of Moses, but I believe she cared for her son for the next 6 or 7 years in the palace. He was given the best of training, food, health, care, education. I'm also fairly confident that the Levite mother was able to pass on her heritage, her tradition as being a Levite to Moses, as she also had obviously done to her other son, Aaron. Aaron's priestly mentions are recorded numerous times throughout Exodus and the book of Numbers. Aaron was one of the two that helped hold up Moses' arms when they were battling against the Amalek's army. When he held his arms up, they were winning. When his arms came down, they began to lose. So the two held his arms up through the battle. Now, Aaron was the older brother, yet he was always subordinate to Moses. Aaron was seen as an important religious leader among his people, even though it was Aaron who allowed the people to melt down their gold and make the golden calf images when Moses was receiving the 10 Commandments. He let in to the people's desire to do something like that because they grew bored of waiting for Moses to come down from the mountain. Jochebed's son, would become the one who would fulfill the centuries-old promise of God. It was Moses, son of Jochebed, who came to lead his people out of slavery and toward the promised land. The world's faithful throughout history look to Moses with more favorability, higher honor, and deeper reverence than any other Old Testament person, even David. And that is surely justifiable. But it would not have been possible if it were not for his mother. When Moses is famously quoted throughout time with, "Let my people go," I feel it's a disservice that we do not also remember his mother, who, through being faithful to God and staying true to her heritage, she should just as historically be remembered by her prayer, "Let my baby live." Sort of sounds like a Mother's Day sermon, doesn't it? It's a great one. When we remember all that Moses was able to do for his people, we should also remember his mother, Jochebed, and all she did for her baby. Amen. Thank you.